Hey, 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 we are back again. This is WVEW 107.7 FM. If you're listening in the area, you have tuned into the Mad Chatter Show. This is DJ Maya, and we are back again. I have my amazing co-host, DJ. Say what's up. Who do we have in the house today, DJ Pooh Bear?
Uh, hey, how's it going, everybody? Today we have a guest. His name is Patrick Jones, and this is actually a gentleman I met a few years back when I was going through a very difficult time in my life with sobriety. And him and I really clicked when we were in a rehabilitation center together. And he went through his own spiritual awakening at the same time, parallel to what I was. And I've just found it absolutely fascinating how much alike we are in the fact like we went into the quest for sobriety at the exact same time. We connected there, and then several years later we get back in contact and he's like, I have to tell you about something. And it was all of this metaphysical spiritual awareness, and I'm like, dude, I know. and But yes, this is my good friend Patrick Jones.
Yay. Welcome, Patrick Jones. Welcome to our show. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. It's nice to be here.
Yes, yes. So this is the Mad Chatter Show. As my listeners know, we go down the spiritual rabbit hole. So before we go any further, you never know what's going to be said. So I like to let everybody know that the views and opinions expressed on this program are those of me and my DJ co-host and my guest, and not of the radio station. So, keep all the negativity to yourself. Not interested here. But if you are interested in hearing this show, you have tuned into the second half of our podcast. So welcome, Patrick. Let everybody know all about you. What would you like to share with our listeners? We do this like just relax and just let everybody know, who you are, whatever you want to tell them, and whoever you want to acknowledge and give shout outs to. We love that. So, it's public radio. If you're listening online, wvew.org. We love you, love you, love you. So, Patrick, take it away. Welcome.
Well, excellent. Yeah, like I said, very happy to be talking with you too. I, 43 years old. I was a Canadian Forces soldier. I was raised in Southern Ontario in the Catholic Church, and I had what can't be otherwise described as a spiritual awakening coming up on 2 years ago. It was the result of, I suppose, a few things, but one, as Don had mentioned, we met in a rehab facility. And in the self-care portion of recovery, I seem to have stumbled into what I now like to call a reconnection. But when it occurred, as in the day of, there was a moment in time, but not to say that it wasn't worked towards with tender love and care, as far as, like I say, caring for myself coming out of alcohol addiction. Um, uh, it was pretty remarkable, and I at the time I just said to people around me, like, I've had a spiritual awakening. There's no other way to describe it, and then I've carried on, and since my life has drastically improved. There were things that happened instantaneous as far as perceptions and of myself and of how I fit into the world. And that was a big part of addiction. So for me, it's hard for me to talk about spirituality without talking about recovery. And then, so it's hard to talk about recovery without talking about addiction. And then if you start talking about addiction, then we start talking about trauma. And then, so I've had a pretty remarkable 2 years with a lot of support in my life from places that my new intuitive self have taken me, specifically in the last 2 years. But really, I can tell you the moment of, or shortly thereafter, I was greeted with feelings of contentment that I hadn't known since I was a young boy. As far as my life made sense, the same mess that I had created with pretty reckless and ridiculous addiction to vodka I was still in the exact situation that I had been the previous day, yet now felt completely able to manage, and have been kind of doing that ever since in recovery. But also, things made sense about the decisions that I've made and the life that I've lived, and I've lived a pretty interesting life, you could say, with travel and being a Canadian Forces soldier, and father and husband, and I've had a great life. But there were times where every experience that I had, I couldn't feel the positive side of it. I could only feel the negative, and it was a hard way to live. And I believe that in our current climate, psychology and mental health is getting a lot of attention, and I think that's very good. But I think it comes short of what I believe that I've also come across is, some answers as to the state of affairs, into not the world, but in my world, my, Southern Ontario or Eastern Ontario, where I live now, and Canada. And I believe that, again, things make sense. And I think it has to do with a lack of connection to source or the universe or God, or however your interpretation goes. And I think that there's a lot of what I would call cultural phenomenon that we as a generation, I'm 43 years old, have inherited, that comes from, I will call it like PTSD of a generation after the world wars, and a disconnection from spirit that was, I think, very intentional. And then we, inherited this intellectualized way of being, and it was very hard on our systems. And I think the current climate of wellness that I can't help but see everywhere I look, I know you see what you want to see, but I see yoga centers, and I see breathing exercises, and I see nutritional experts, and I see people identifying with the fact that they wake up in the morning and they don't like how they feel, and they do everything that they're told, and they still wake up in the morning and don't like how they feel. And I think addictions are born from that, and I think all kinds of other compulsive behavior is born from that. And again, I believe that to be a symptom of a collection of people who are living without a spiritual connection. And now we're starting to reconnect ourselves, all in time for the shift, as it's known, and all kinds of other great stuff that I myself have been learning about, raised to not even believe in the concepts, let alone the actual material, if you will, as to what is known about time and space and how we fit in, and Mother Earth and all this good stuff. And I believe that I am a part of the shift as it's known. And I've got many reasons. Like I say, my perceptions changed so drastically with connection. And now, almost 2 years with connection, my life makes a lot of sense. And I learned a lot of things about state of affairs on one side. And now a lot of it scientifically is applying to this spiritual life that I'm living. So it's for me, I've never felt better. And yes, not drinking a pint of vodka every day has improved my life, and would have improved my life if I had just ceased that. But I don't believe that the state of affairs that I have arranged for myself right now can be attributed to just that. It's more about manifestation and energy, and what I'm putting out there, and now what I'm getting back. And not to rant and rave about life is good. It's more about, I have something very real to work towards, and just the ability to work towards that is what keeps me ticking. And yeah, it's a very nice way.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, also congratulations on the sobriety. A pint of vodka a day. I can't drink vodka. Vodka made me have many regrets. I'm like, who was that person?
When Patrick and I met, I was a dozen tall boys a day.
Oh my. No
And
way.
I drank myself down to 98 pounds.
What?
When I went into rehab, you can ask him, I ate for about the first week because I had drank myself down to 98 pounds. I was almost dead.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Death by
We met at
alcohol.
the most vulnerable time we could have possibly met for the exact right reason, because it was on my show that got interrupted because of the connection. Patrick had mentioned one of the practices we did at that facility, and you're going to have to refresh my memory on it. But the last one was spirituality. And to me, up until that point, spirituality had been something that had existed in a suit and in a church. I didn't even know there was a side to believing in things outside of religion. And
Right.
that was one of the main points that you had made on my show. Can you just refresh my memory, Patrick? What was the exercise again?
Of course, of course. I talk about it as often as I can when, not just in addiction. It comes up in conversations of addiction, and if I'm with a group of people that are struggling with addiction, it's a helpful tool. But on top of that, I think it's just such a value. So it's called TEMPS, TEMPS, and it's a play on the word temperature as to how you're feeling. And the T stands for triggers, the E stands for emotional, the M stands for mental, P physical, and S spiritual. And it's an exercise that you do. So we were in a facility for 3 weeks. That it was a course 3 weeks long that we knew. And so twice a day, mornings and evenings, you have to sit with a group of strangers and people that you get to know eventually, and describe how you're feeling in that moment. And there's lots of value. It's very similar to, say, journaling, but you're journaling out loud. But for me, I made it to this facility, and I say that I had a couple of real close brushes with suicide, as was, again, part of my addiction and part of my lack of connection. And so when I made it to this place, I didn't know what to expect. As a soldier, I hadn't been in any touch with Veterans Affairs. This was all through OHIP, and I had kind of gone through a huge process of paperwork and appointments and kind of maintaining my addiction to be able to get into this place as I saw it at the time. And in having to do that exercise, when I got to S for spirituality, I really didn't know how to answer the question, because when I put some thought into it, I emotionally and mentally, I kind of looked at spirituality as it was the combination of those two things or something like that. And so I said to the guys early on, I don't know what to tell you. I'm not being smug or smart. When you say I feel connected or I don't feel connected, I said, I don't know what you mean by that. But it was in that place that I decided I had a raging addiction that I knew I kind of did to myself, and I didn't exactly know why at that point in time, but I knew at that point I couldn't stop. It was beyond, it was beyond. I really could not stop on my own. I had scared myself a few times in wanting to try to stop for real, and actually couldn't do it. So I made it to this place, did this exercise, and decided that I had an issue with spirituality. And the way that it played out for me was, in the next step was I made it to a second facility that I could stay up to 6 months. And I stayed there for 5 months, and I learned a heck of a lot about recovery and about addiction and other things that I didn't really anticipate to learn curriculum wise. But I also did online courses that were called the 40 Days of Transformation. And it was learning how to meditate. And it was a silent mantra, lots of Sanskrit. David G is the spiritual guidance, and he's an amazing guy. I still do his guided meditations to this day. And I didn't take all that good advice that I learned in the rehab facility, or the ability to know how to meditate, as it is kind of a skill. Once you know how to do it, you can go from there. I waited about a year of further drinking, and then I really believe, almost intervention wise, like the universe just had me stop drinking. I didn't really quit. It just kind of stopped working for me. And I was hyper aware of it, but I ran with that ball. And shortly after, like a month and change, in the midst of an energy massage, as it was called, I had a full-on spiritual awakening. And like I say, I've been better for it ever since. But it was the addiction that had me, I like to say, it took me 4 years to quit drinking for a year. As in, I had lots of starts and stops, and it was pretty brutal on everybody around me and brutal on myself. And it was when I made this decision that just kind of, came to me to go into recovery versus just quit drinking and care for myself in a way that I never cared for myself. And I had an amazing summer. Everybody around me watched me come off of like very much alcohol per day. And I just went cold turkey because it went away. And then I lived this great summer in the river, kayaking, canoeing, camping. It was wonderful, and I was reconnecting with a lot of things. And it was the first great summer that I had in a long time as a raging alcoholic. I can tell you.
Wow.
I don't care for that term alcoholic because I do believe it was a choice, but
Yeah.
I digress.
It was like a tool. You used it, you used a little too much, you wore the tool out, and then you're like, I don't need this tool anymore.
You know what? That's pretty darn close, I'll tell you.
Well, that's like with me, I was drinking 5 Jack and Cokes a day, and I could not quit, and I was just like, man. And then I went on my own. I did a spiritual journey too. And it was like the last stage. Well, there's always stages, but it was like another step. And on my 40th birthday, it was my 40th birthday. Man, 43. I just feel like I said 43 just not too long ago. I'm pushing 48. You guys, it's going to go by fast. Ah. 43 years old.
I assumed you were in your
Pooh Bear. Are you guys the same age?
No, I'm 46.
Okay. I'm 47. I'm your elder. But that's amazing. So were you going through this by yourself, or did you have family? Did you have support?
The support has come from not everywhere that I anticipated, but I think that's been part of the process too, the whole healing process. But I feel that in the end, I had to isolate myself, and I kind of used alcohol to isolate myself a little bit. And as much as it was a raging addiction, there was also a lot of progress that was going on when I was on my own for that period of time. And yeah, I'd say I've always, as much help as I had asked for, I could always find. I do believe that. I've got some great friends and some great family. And yes, like I say, I've made life difficult for some of those around me, and I'm hyper aware of that. But I also think that I bring to the table as well. And
nice.
It's being spiritually awake is a funny way to say it, but connected. For me, it's just, I know the difference. I can remember still to this moment. I know how I would react to situations, the old me, if you want to call it that, or that's how, for lack of a better term. And so I see myself in my culture, and I see myself in the old me, and it just. Oh no.
Archangel Zachiel, please surround our connection.
Muted.
Archangel Zachiel, surround Patrick's connection. Can you hear us?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, cool. Sometimes we get infringements that try to stop the connection when you're talking like heartful stuff and meaningful stuff. They don't like that. But sorry, you froze for a second. So go ahead. You were saying.
Remember what you. Oh.
That's okay.
Well, so my experience that I'd really like to share is about the mind and the body, and how the old me truly believed that I was my mind and I was my body. And as a young man, 30-year-old man, I put a lot of thought into that, and had decided that I was my mind and I was my body. And when I died, I ceased to exist. And I feel that I lived a life according, but on top of that, when I reconnected, it was just so profound because I was coming back from complete disbelief that anything like a spiritual connection to the universe existed. So for me, it was quite profound. And possibly for others who put enough thought into why are we here? What is this existence? The answers that I've been provided, I'm not satisfied with. And to cope, I believe that I had this core value, and I learned about core values in the second rehab facility that I went to, that people who claimed to being able to manipulate or be manipulated by energy in any way were lying, or were being lied to, and or were lying to themselves. And I felt that I had figured out this fact, and I didn't have to worry about spirituality. I could just live my life. And I had what I can't help but look back fondly at great successes under that umbrella of ideology. But when I required spirit, when I required on this earth a connection, I didn't have it. And I got myself into a very dark place with addiction and suicide. And so, like, I don't anticipate that everybody who is part of the move, like, it's not, I don't think that it's a movement, a social movement. As much as it's a social movement, I do believe it's an energy movement as far as raised vibrations and what's happening on the earth. And so I just think there's a lot of people that, while not, it doesn't have to be as profound as lock yourself in a addiction facility at the height of COVID to learn how to meditate, to reconnect themselves. But slowly but surely, everybody, or not everybody, but many around us are doing just that. And as a culture, as a people, we're deciding to live our lives in a better way. And it has much to do with connection to our spirit, and that we are not our body, and that we are not our mind. And once I used to hear these things, and I would try and wrap my head around it. I would try and intellectualize it, and I would go as far as I could with it. But upon awakening or reconnection, these things became inherent knowledge, and I could listen to people speak. Like when I was in that state of just the week after I had that energy session, where I really knew that my core value was wrong, that people could manipulate energy and are manipulated by energy, and everything just made sense. And I could listen to the videos of people describing how it all works on the physics side of it, and I had this inherent knowledge in my heart, not in my mind, as to how it all works. But yes, that is what I am. And again, the contentment that I felt, just, it gave me perspective to, like I say, manage my own turmoil and then start to clean it up. And then at this point in my life, just be able to give back. And I'm, like I said, I live a pretty good life these days as far as doing what I kind of, how I want to live, and I'm having some success with it as far as, helping those around me, which is really nice.
That's awesome. Have you been also helping, like, mentoring others as well? Have you found yourself calling to do that?
I find my calling is live your best life. It's all about know thyself, and that, I think that comes with a strong spiritual practice. And then once you know yourself, then it's like, okay, why am I here and what am I up to? And then you can take the life that you've lived, because like I said, my life makes a lot of sense. when I was doing things at the time, a lot of it made no sense. Joining the army from where I came from made no sense to anybody, but it made perfect sense to me, and it served me well. But not always. And because I didn't have spirit, being a soldier was hard. And but at this point, I find all of those experiences really add up to what I'm kind of up to now, which is a lot of physical fitness, and I'm getting into entertainment. And I feel that, to answer your question, I have been, I'll say blessed, but they say that you make all these choices yourself anyway. But my mission is to live my best life and show those around me that everybody else can do just that. That's a big part of it. I do have, I believe, a message that, kind of came to me on reconnection, which is advice to my culture. And for me, it started around the local, I can't help but say the word native, my native friends, but the indigenous culture here in the Ottawa Valley is where I ended up. Instead of an AA meeting or instead of an addictions group, I was around a drum, and I was singing and I was sharing and chanting, and I was basically kind of complaining to these guys that I felt I had turned my back on my culture. And because these people just didn't understand, there was all this turmoil, and everyone just feigned why it was happening. I felt I knew exactly why it was happening, and it led to feelings that I was just going to walk away, and just got a lot of great advice from that culture. My favorite expression of all time is "Your intentions will be met," and take what you need and leave the rest behind. And there's